You can feel when someone is different. No words are needed. The body senses it before the mind understands. There are people who change the air just by walking into a room. And no, that's not charisma. It's presence. It's the self breathing silently after the ego has died. Carl Jung called this the aura of the individuated, the invisible field of those who have done the work most avoid. They don't need to prove anything because they've already lost all that was false. But before we continue, a warning. If you still need applause to exist, this video might irritate you. Because here, there's no room for spiritual performances, nor for pretty phrases about peace. Here, spirituality has scars. So, if you feel ready to look in the mirror and see what your unconscious has been trying to show you for years, sign up now, because here, no one will spare you the truth. What Jung discovered about these people is simple and devastating. They don't try to be present. They've simply stopped preventing it. And that's why the air changes when they arrive. There are people who don't need to say anything to disarm you. They just arrive, and something within you begins to quiet, as if the unconscious recognizes a familiar field. This is what Carl Jung called the presence of the individuated, the state in which the ego bows to the self, and the whole being begins to breathe in coherence. There is no performance, no effort to appear enlightened. Spirituality there is not discourse. It is a vibration the body feels before the mind comprehends. This presence is rare because it demands what few can bear, dying to their own masks. While many seek attention, the awakened disappear, and it is in this disappearance that the air changes density. When the shadow ceases to fight against the light, a calm that cannot be faked is born. You feel it in places where someone truly conscious has been. The space becomes lighter, as if the collective unconscious recognizes a new, silent order. The air seems charged with lucidity. Voices lower, noises dissolve, and even thoughts slow down. Awakened presence creates a psychological field where the unconscious of others regulates itself as if an invisible metronome adjusts the internal rhythm of those who approach. It's not magnetism nor charisma, it's congruence. When body, mind, and soul stop warring, the field aligns, and this alignment is felt as peace. This is how true spirituality manifests, not as effort, but as the absence of resistance. If you want to begin to feel this kind of presence, start by eliminating the noise. Talk less, observe more. When you wake up, don't rush to your cell phone. Breathe for a minute and notice how your mind tries to escape the silence. This discomfort is the ego begging for distraction. Read Jung's Man and His Symbols and notice how the psyche speaks when you finally fall silent. Silence is not empty. It is the space where the unconscious reveals its symbolic language. It is there that the self whispers, and those who learn to listen to it begin to transform the very air. But this is only the first step. Inner silence must now become a field. Jung said that external chaos is always a reflection of the unresolved unconscious. Most people live in an inner war. The ego wants to control. The shadow wants to be seen. The self tries to reconcile what consciousness insists on denying. This conflict creates a noise that the body translates into anxiety, insomnia, impatience. You feel it on the streets, in the looks of others, in hurried conversations. The whole world is an out-of-tune orchestra because few have the courage to tune their own instrument. When someone individuates, this noise ceases, and silence becomes order. The surrounding field reorganizes because the mind has stopped fragmenting reality. The person no longer tries to impose peace. They have become peace. Have you ever been around someone like this? The air changes, time slows, words lose urgency. It's the serenity that comes from within and spreads like an invisible perfume. Jung called this psychic coherence. when conscious and unconscious stop opposing each other and begin to dance together. This inner alignment creates a unified field where even the unconscious of others regulates itself. It's not a gift, it's work. The awakened one has faced the wars you still avoid, mourned the grief you silence, looked at the monsters you call distraction. That's why their energy is clean, not because they never suffered, but because they let suffering fulfill its alchemical function. Want to feel the beginnings of this field within you? Stop lying. That's right. Start with small truths. Say no when you want to say no. Breathe before reacting. Do Jungian therapy or write about what hurts you until the paper tears. The unified field is born from honesty. When consciousness recognizes what the unconscious whispers, the body relaxes, the gaze expands, and life ceases to be an escape. The peace you seek externally is merely the echo of internal reconciliation. And when this harmony is born, reality begins to respond, as if the entire universe breathed in rhythm with you. But there is something even deeper than the unified field, the shadow that has learned to shine. People believe that awakening means getting rid of the shadow, when in reality it means making it transparent. Carl Jung said that nothing is more dangerous than what the ego refuses to see. The shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It infiltrates everything you touch, your relationships, your unwittingly hurtful words, your desire to appear good. True spiritual work begins when you stop running from your own darkness and start listening to it. This is the point at which the ego trembles, because it realizes that what it called evil is just the exiled part of consciousness begging to come home. Integrating the shadow is like lighting a candle inside a cave. What once frightened you reveals structure, depth, and contours. Transparency arises when the individual faces their own abyss without identifying with it. The awakened person doesn't deny anger, jealousy, or vanity. They recognize them as legitimate voices of the unconscious. And by giving way to these forces, they lose their power to dominate. Have you ever noticed how someone authentic can confess their flaws and still convey strength? It's because power comes not from perfection, but from the radical acceptance of imperfection. This is the difference between the ego and the self. The ego strives to maintain its image intact. The self prefers wholeness to appearance. The integrated shadow becomes light because it no longer needs to hide. And when you reach this point, your presence becomes permissive. It authorizes the other to be human too. Want a brutal yet liberating exercise? Write a list of the things you most condemn in others and read it aloud. Each item is a mirror of the unconscious. Observe without judgment. When you feel shame, remember, this feeling is the portal. Shame is the gateway to the shadow. Read Jung's Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and realize how even he had to lose himself to find the self. Awakening isn't about being light, it's about being whole. And when the shadow learns to shine, you discover that the dark also illuminates. It is in this balance that time begins to lose its control over you, and the now becomes eternal. The human mind lives trapped between what once was and what is not yet. Carl Jung said that the ego measures life in minutes, but the self lives in eternity. The awakened being is one who escapes the timeline and rests in the circle of the now. They do not chase happiness because they have realized that the search is already a separation. The unconscious does not understand clocks. It understands rhythm, cycle, return. When you are present, time loses its power. The guilt of the past and the anxieties of the future dissolve, and the moment becomes vast enough to contain everything. This is the stillness of being, not a pause in movement, but awareness within it. The silence that observes without haste is more transformative than 1,000 hurried actions. Have you ever noticed how, around someone truly present, the world slows down? Coffee cools more slowly, gazes linger longer, and the body relaxes as if the unconscious recognizes a refuge. Jung called this timeless presence, the ability to exist completely in an instant and yet touch something eternal. It's the opposite of the spiritual rush we see today, this obsession with evolving quickly. The awakened don't accelerate, they deepen. They know that each breath is a reincarnation. This awareness alters the surrounding field. Present people heal not because they actively heal, but because they disarm the temporality within the other. Their calm reorganizes the chaos. Their attention is a form of love that the clock doesn't understand. Want to experience the eternal now? Try something simple. Sit and gaze at your hands for a full minute without looking away. Observe what the unconscious does to pull you away. It will remind you of tasks, fill you with restlessness, invent urgencies. This resistance is the ego trying to escape the self. Stay, breathe. Time will expand. You will begin to feel that 1 minute is a mental illusion. This simple practice is a gateway to what Jung called symbolic consciousness, the state where every second is enough. When time ceases, love changes nature. It ceases to be waiting and becomes presence. Most people confuse love with fusion. They want to merge with another because they've never fused with themselves. Carl Jung said that unconscious love is a contract between wounds. One seeks the mother they never had, the other seeks the father who never returned. The result is always the same: dependence disguised as affection. Conscious love arises when individuation heals this need for external completeness. It's when the self learns to be self-sufficient and the ego stops using the other as an emotional crutch. Mature spirituality understands that loving isn't about losing yourself, it's about expanding. And this expansion only happens when there's enough internal space for the other to exist without erasing you. Love isn't about fusion, it's about lucid coexistence. Have you ever noticed how truly awakened people don't beg for reciprocity? They love without begging in return because they understand that love is an expression of consciousness, not a form of exchange. They can look at someone and say, "I love you," without expecting anything in return, neither presence nor promise. Jung called this a conscious relationship, when the self recognizes the self in the other. That's why this kind of love doesn't bind, but it also doesn't flee. It embraces without dissolving. It's like a fire that warms but doesn't burn. And the most beautiful thing is that this love heals the collective unconscious because it breaks the ancestral cycle of need disguised as passion. Want to start feeling this love within yourself? First, stop romanticizing attachment. Observe how you try to control the one you love, with sweet words, with guilt, with silence. This is fear, not love. Then start observing yourself in the little things. When you feel rejected, look at the wound, not the other. Read Jung's The Red Book and see how he transformed love itself into a path of individuation. Practice solitude. Sit with yourself until the void feels like home. Only then will you understand what Jung called connection without dependence. And it is in this love without possession that true creative power arises, the one that prepares the ground for the fertile emptiness that follows. The ego fears emptiness because it believes that to exist is to be full of certainties, of beliefs, of voices. Carl Jung said that consciousness is only renewed when the old dies in silence. Emptiness is not absence, it is the womb of the self. It is the space where the unconscious is finally allowed to create the new. But the ego, addicted to control, fills everything with noise, opinions, theories, distractions. This is why almost no one listens to the unconscious. Emptiness is the interval between one thought and the next, that moment of stillness where something greater can enter. It is in this space that individuation flourishes, and it is also there that true spirituality begins, when you realize you don't need to know, just to hold the mystery. Those who can endure emptiness become channels. These people have a different presence. They speak little, observe a lot, and when they do speak, each word carries symbolic weight. Jung called this the fertile void, the fertile void. The awakened individual lives in a state of openness. They are not full of themselves, and therefore the self can move through them. They understand that creation comes not from effort, but from surrender. It's the same principle as great artists, healers, and thinkers. What moves them is not control, but the inner space they preserve for the unexpected to happen. When the unconscious finds this space, it doesn't whisper, it creates. Want to experience the creative void? Stop trying to be right all the time. Let go of a belief you hold in anger. Spend an entire day in silence. Observe how the ego contorts trying to fill the air. Rid Rollo May's The Way of Being, and understand that creativity arises from the tension between emptiness and possibility. Ask questions without demanding answers. Walk aimlessly. The unconscious speaks the language of chance, and when you learn to listen to it, the new begins to emerge effortlessly. Ideas, encounters, synchronicities. Emptiness doesn't destroy you, it remakes you. But few reach this point. Few realize that emptiness is the prelude to wholeness. When the self takes the place of the ego, something shifts in frequency. The individual ceases to have presence and becomes presence. Carl Jung said that wholeness is the point at which the conscious and unconscious cease conflict and become a single organism. The shadow, the ego, desire, pain, all begin to serve consciousness instead of sabotaging it. The awakened being no longer tries to project any image. It has become transparent. Spirituality at this stage is not practice, it is a state. And this state is felt before it is understood. The atmosphere changes, gestures slow, and even silence gains density. It is the unified field, the translucent shadow, suspended time, conscious love, and the fertile void, all coexisting within the same body. This is the point of individuation where the being becomes a mirror. Their presence reflects to those who arrive what still needs to be integrated. Some feel welcomed, others threatened. This doesn't depend on words. It's the energy of the unconscious reacting to what has been mirrored. The total individual doesn't seek to convince anyone because their existence is already an argument. They experience what Jung called the presence of the self, the state in which human consciousness aligns with the universal psychic order. This is why, around these people, animals approach. Chance seems to cooperate, and even the air seems more stable. It's not mysticism, it's coherence vibrating on a human scale. But this totality is not a fixed destination. It is a constant journey. The awakened being remains human. They feel pain, doubt, anger, but none of them dominates them. They have learned to move between poles without clinging to any. They experience the paradox of being full and empty at the same time. If you want to begin to feel this, start by observing your own body when you are at peace. See how your chest expands, how your face relaxes, how your gaze stops searching. This is the language of the self. And when you begin to recognize it, you realize that every personal individuation is a rehearsal for the collective awakening that is already approaching. A larger, silent, inevitable movement. Carl Jung believed that the individuation of a single being already alters the collective unconscious. When someone awakens, the entire human field reorganizes. What you heal within yourself isn't just personal. It's transgenerational, spiritual, ancestral. Every integrated shadow transforms into light the world can see. And that's why the presence of the awakened seems to alter the atmosphere. They are rare, but enough. Jung called these people seeds of the new consciousness, beings who live amidst the collective unconscious without being dragged by it. They don't preach, they don't argue, they incarnate. Their simple existence disarms psychic patterns that sustain centuries of slumber. Imagine the collective unconscious as a turbulent ocean made of fears, traumas, and repetitions. Each awakened individual is a firm island emerging from these waters. As more islands emerge, the sea begins to change color. This is what Jung saw as the beginning of a new psychological era, not technological, but spiritual. A time when the collective self begins to recognize itself through each person who dares to look within. And this is the responsibility of those who awaken, to sustain their own field, even when the world still sleeps. The ego screams, it's useless. But the self knows that the simple act of remaining conscious is what keeps humanity standing. Want to understand what to do with this calling? Stop seeking a mission and start living coherently. The mission isn't what you do, it's who you are when you're awake. Every time you choose presence over haste, truth over convenience, you strengthen the invisible network that connects these islands. Read Jung's The Spirit in Art and Science and understand how the unconscious manifests itself through everything you create. You don't need to save the world, you just need to become lucid within it. Because when the self awakens in many, the entire ocean changes tides. And it is in this silent movement that a new humanity begins to breathe. Perhaps true awakening is not a light that descends, but a fall that you finally allow. Because the self does not arrive, it emerges slowly when the ego stops fighting. Most people don't wake up, just learn to pretend to be calm. She smiles, meditates, quotes Jung, but she still lives trapped in the mirror. And that's why the air doesn't change when they come in, because inside nothing has changed. But you felt the call in your body, didn't you? That silent pressure that asks you to stop acting, that discomfort that haunts you in empty conversations. This is the self trying to be born. And the birth of the soul is painful. You will bleed, you will lose faces, certainties, names, but what remains is what it always was. If this has you burning inside, sign up now, because this was just the first cut.